child in India is supposed to be the first in Asia to have got electricity. Again, that once I gave a lecture in the College of Kolar Goldfields, then they clapped. I said, don't clap. Why did they do it? So that John Taylor and company would extract gold and take them. Do you know today approximately 1,000 tons of gold are extracted? To whom does it belong to? They are robbers. British garrison was there in Bangalore. They did not give electricity even to them. Straight it went. Even today the remnants of that line is there. And again I am telling you, to which place a robber or thief will go? Does he go to a hut to steal? If he goes to a hut to steal, he should leave something there and come out. Why did they come here? Why did they come here? They came here because they knew the riches. They came with a scale, is it clear? And then exchanged the scale with a sword. They came here to trade in spices, and they understood that we were weak and tried to subjugate completely to us. I'll give one more instance. The robber queen is having our diamond in her crown, the Kohinoor diamond. Do you think the Kohinoor diamond was excavated somewhere else? It was excavated near the Golconda mines. Why I am giving this example? Why I am giving the example I am telling you? If you have to know the mining of the gold, you must know how to prospect for the ore. You should have the mining technology. You should know how to extract the ore of the diamond. You should know how to cut it, how to polish it. All these things, no. Do you think all these things are possible with a civilization which always thinks of the other world? Is it ever possible? And even today, you know, most of the diamond in the world comes for cutting and polishing to Surat in India. Right? And the famous throne, Mayura Simhasana, which is today in Iran, from where it was taken? It was taken from Delhi. I don't think I need to go to so many examples to show that our past was great, but unfortunately our present is unfortunate, but we must make a decision and make a resolve that our tomorrow will be very, very great. It is definitely not possible. Now, let me define who is a rishi. I know I am taking a fairly long introduction, but it is very much necessary for you to develop the self-confidence. It is not a hollow boast. It is not a hollow boast. Everything can be proved. In the ancient Indian system, we generally talk of rishis. As I told you already, what is the picture you have in your mind? Remove that. I have spoken this in many conferences. A rishi is a scientist. Pure, simple, and nothing else. Who is Kanadaya Maharshi, the one who worked on physics? Who is Parashara, the father of botany? Right? Likewise, I can give any number of examples of rishis. Right? Then why were they in the forest? Obviously, to be away from the urban conglomeration, urban noise and nonsense, so that they can pray to God, God Almighty, Goddess Saraswati. They were not celibates. They had their own families. I just give an example. Sage Vishwamitra. If you have to be a really debilitated body rishi, would King Dasharatha have sent Rama and Lakshmana to Vishwamitra to learn archery from him? Do you know they were so capable that they used to say, Shapadapi Sharadapi. They are capable of both. With this few little background, now I am sure that the knowledge that we are going to acquire, we had acquired, was a true knowledge and was not a spurious knowledge. And in my case, I hold a doctorate degree in modern botany, but I also hold a doctorate in Sanskrit and science, Sanskrit and botany. Glimpses of plant science from Sanskrit literature is my daily degree. Why did I do it? I know a little bit of working knowledge of Sanskrit. I thought we speak so much about Sanskrit and other things, but unfortunately, I am sure it is the expectation of many people here, though not the scholars here, we come across Sanskrit only in rare circumstances. When you go to a temple, where the sound of the conch or the bell is more than the mantras chanted by the Purohit, the meaning of which you don't understand, or any religious function that is celebrated in families where the gathering will be busy discussing their day-to-day affairs and the Purohit will be chanting the mantras, and that too sometimes in a way where some of the mantras, if I am right, is to be said by the bridegroom, that he is tying the thali and all those things. Bridegroom will be busy discussing something and Purohit is chanting mantras of these things. Look to what level we have degraded Sanskrit. To what level we have degraded Sanskrit. That is why we think that Sanskrit means only Purohits, priests should know. No. It is the lingua franca, it is the depository of entire, if not whole, of the ancient Indian wisdom. With this few background, now I would like to go directly into the topic of today. I am supposed to talk on ecology and environment in Vriksha Ayurveda, but let me expand. I have told Dr. Kameshwari expand, so I would like to tell more of Vriksha Ayurveda botanical aspects and also the ecological sciences. For the purpose of research, we can classify Sanskrit literature on science into three categories: the sacred literature, the lay literature, and the technical literature. Sacred literature consists of Vedas, Samhitas, Purana and all those things, including epics, right? And then the lay literature includes the works of Kalidasa, Bhasa and others. And the technical literature includes Vriksha Ayurveda and many of the Ayurveda and many of the Tantra literature and all those things are there. How do you glean information from sacred literature? Sacred literature, many a time you may not get evidences, but out of intuition it is mentioned. And in the lay literature it is given by comparison to other aspects. For example, the king is the main stem of the plant and the plant is the kingdom and all those things. In technical literature, the information is given directly, very directly. So while one has to be a bit careful in analyzing the first and the second category of literature, right? The third category does not need any explanation because the information is given directly there. Otherwise, you see, in your zeal of showing we are one up, right? In fact, I should mention a joke here. It seems two people were bragging about their country. I am sure you must have heard of this also. One person said, we dug up to about 800 feet, we got a piece of wire, so we knew telegraphy. The other fellow could not keep it. He must say something. He said, we dug up to 1000 feet, we did not get anything, so we knew wireless. This should not be the type of boast that we have. There is no need, because you see, enough and more true things are so much, I am telling you, that it can fill the whole load of books, so there is no need for a hollow boast. When I am mentioning about the facts, I am basically a modern scientist. Unless after verifying, unless obtaining proof, and I am not going to mention anything. Is it clear? And all the facts that I have mentioned since 1981, I have been attending International Botanical Congress in Sydney, Germany, Austria. I always present two papers, one on ancient Indian botany, another on modern botany, because I want they to know. And if I have told something that is not correct, let them tear me with the questions and all those things. I am telling you, confidently since 1981, I have been able to answer all those questions convincingly, and the facts of botany that I am going to mention, including ecology, are only those facts that have been substantiated, that have been submitted to large gatherings of scientists. Coming to the, I am picking up just one text from sacred literature, that is epic Mahabharata, and 3 or 4 texts from the technical literature. One is Amrakosha, Brihat Samhita, and then Parashara's Vriksha Ayurveda. Dr. Subramaniam has spoken enough and more about Vriksha Ayurveda, but my line of inquiry is a bit different from him. He is interested more in practicality, utility and application. In fact, that is more important. My idea is to try to provide a solid background of concepts for this, so that the facts mentioned and application have a sound basis of the concepts. Mahabharata is not just a religious book. It is really Maha. It includes anything and everything. You will be surprised to know in Mahabharata there is mention of one of the newest branches of science, neurobiology. And it also mentioned ecophysiology, ascent of sap, and then photosynthesis, etc. Now remember, this is the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata. There are about 7 to 8 verses which speak of pure, simple science. This is supposed to be a discourse between the rishis Bhrigu and Bharadwaja. Rishis Bhrigu and Bharadwaja. When two rishis meet as religious people, what do you expect them? Alright, what vrata did you do today? When did you eat last? 15 days back or 20 days back? Were you able to get enough leaves to eat? No, they don't discuss that. You know, what do they discuss? Whether plants have life or not. So my question is, religious people, if they get leaves from the plant, it is enough. But why should they bother? What are the characters of life? What characters plant will have? Are the plants having life or not? In the process, they discuss about all sensory perceptions in them. Look at this. I will quote some Sanskrit verses. Ushmato mayate parinam tvakphalam pushpamevacha mlayate chaiva shitena sparshena tatra vidyate. I don't think I need to give translation to your Sanskrit scholars. The sense of touch. Vaivagni nirghoshaihi palam pushpam vishiryate shrotrena grihnate shabdam tasmat shunvanti padapaha. They are able to listen. They are able to see. Valli veshtayate vriksham sarvatre naiva gacchati nakhvayat drishta margosti tasmat pashyanti padapaha. They are able to see. Now, I would like to elaborate a little bit on this. They are able to see how? See in inverted commas. We human beings are so much conditioned to about our definition. Is it clear? In a tight box, anything does not fit, we say it is non-existent. Seeing means what? Literally, reception to sensory, reception to the light. A photosensitivity is seeing. Whether it has eyes or not, it is immaterial. But lo and behold, actual physical eyes are also present in plants. Not in higher plants. There is a plant Chlamydomonas which has got an eye spot. Right? It moves in water. It's a microscopic plant. Moves in water towards light so that it will be in an advantageous position for photosynthesis to carry it out. And do you know, scientists at the Max Planck Research Institute few years back have discovered that the functioning of the Chlamydomonas eye, a plant, is exactly similar to the functioning of a human eye. It has got rods and cones. Behold, its photosensitivity is 1000 times faster than the human eye. These are not my figures. And then, plants, they are also able to see. Papai pundair tatha gandhair dhupaischa vividhairapi arogav pushpitas santi tasmat jigranti padapaha. They are able to smell. Padai salila panascha vyadhinamapi darshayat vyadhi pratikriyatvaschа vidyati rasanam drume. They are able to taste, sense of taste. All the 5 elements, sensory elements are there. And now comes the question, plants absorb water, what do they do? I am telling you, I was thrilled when I read this because discoveries attributed to Westerners in 16th century, even today we teach in classes. I will explain the meaning also and the interpretation also. Vaktre vatpala nalena yathordvam jalamadade tatha pavana samyukta padai pipati padapaha. What is it? You cut the petiole of a lotus, dip it in water, you suck water. With whatever force water enters into your mouth, with the same force plants absorb water. Now, when the petiole is dipped in water, tell me where is the force? The force is not near the source. Water. Force is elsewhere. So the force is made to travel downwards by creating a vacuum. By sucking the air, a vacuum is created. Into that vacuum runs water and reaches the mouth. Same is the mechanism in plants also. Evaporation of the water by the process of transpiration takes place in the leaves. And because of the transpiration, a vacuum created travels completely downwards and it reaches the source where there is soil water and the water is sacred. Vaktrena utpala nalena yatha urdhvam jalam adadet tatha pavana samyuktaha padai vibhati padapaha. Is this not a scientific discovery? Dickson and Joly, two German scientists, they proposed a theory of transpiration pull in 16th century, and they said that because of there is no force near the water. Is it clear? There is no force near the roots. It is like this. Water is absorbed through I think too much water entered. There is no force near the roots. So water is absorbed through the roots rather than by the roots. I hope you understand the difference in this one. Tell me, is there any difference between Dickson and Joly's theory and this? Why should we not teach this? Is this not science? Is this a cock and bull story? Is it non-science? No, it does not stop at this. Brew gets one more doubt. All right, so much water enters into the plant. What happens to that water? This is a beautiful interface between the non-organic component of the environment and the organic component if you want to talk of ecology. Tena tajjala madattau jarayat yagni marutaihi ahara parimanascha sneho vruddhischa jayate. The water that comes up gets cooked with the fire of the sun, and water, because of that, food is prepared and plants will grow. What is this concept? Photosynthesis. Even today, is the concept of photosynthesis different? Tena tajjala madattau jarayat yagnimarutaihi ahara parimanascha sneho vruddhischa jayate. No, it is unimaginable. There is just carbon dioxide, water, and a fruit is there, which you can eat. You cannot eat and be happy with carbon dioxide or only with water. And you cannot just go and say, wear a green shirt, right? Stand in sunlight, drink water and say, yes, I have got food. If this is not the concept of photosynthesis, what is it I would like to know? This was in, again, 17th century, but I think Joseph Inzenhouse and others discovered various, even to this moment, the basic concept of photosynthesis is the same. Should we not include this so that let our students feel not a hollow pride, a genuine one? And mind you, I am not a Sanskrit scholar, so I don't want to get into discussion with the age of Mahabharata, and I hope all of you agree, a very conservative estimate could be 1500 BC. I am not telling it is right, very conservative. And when was this discovered? 16th century. 1500 plus 1600. 3100 years early, ancient Indian rishis who were always thinking of hell, heaven, etc., had written this. Two rishis have discovered this one. Is this not science? Is this not true science? Well, next I would like to go to actual Vrikshavya text. Amarakosha by Amarasima. Recently I completed a project on Amarakosha for Indian National Science Academy. Initially I wanted to show the photographs of plants, but I could not make slides. Normally I am very familiar, very good at ease in extempore, so normally I don't resort to those things. I have brought that book, it is with Dr. Yamuna. You can have a look at those plants and I will explain it. There are 308 plants mentioned in the Vanaushadhi Varga of Amarakosha. All of them are identified and all of them with color photographs, because I don't want the name only to remain as a name, because it is named after a plant. Every plant should have that one. Amarakosha by Amarasimha is a lexicon, mainly dealing with linguistic aspects, language construction and all those things. What botany is there in that? That is the beauty of Indian literature. You get anything and everything provided you search. Seek, you will be able to find it. Knock, it shall open. That should be our idea. I studied Amarakosha as a student of Sanskrit way back when I was 8 or 10-year-old boy. Little did I realize that it consists of such fantastic things. I don't blame my Sanskrit teachers. They were busy teaching us as to how to learn Amarakosha by rote. In fact, the entire Vanaushadhi Varga had learnt by rote without knowing its meaning. Let me tell you very, very frankly. Book consists of several Vargas in 3 Kandas. Varivarga, Bhuvarga, and then Puravarga, Bhogivarga, Simhadi Varga, Vanaushadhi Varga. All this consist of information on plants and about ecology also. Briefly to discuss the ecological aspects present in mentioned in Vanaushadhi in Amarakosha. See, in Amarakosha you don't get any description or explanation like in other books. You just get a word. When you get a word, you must interpret. For this word to originate, some structure should have been there. Otherwise that word will not come. For example, in Puravarga it says Rajamarga. That's nothing else is there. So when there is a word Rajamarga, there has to be a Rajamarga. That means they knew how to build highways and all those things. That is how we have to interpret. Both abiotic ecology and biotic ecology information is there in the different Vargas. Abiotic ecology, you get a part of it in Varivarga, Bhuvarga, as well as Shaila Varga. In Varivarga, you get different types of rivers, pond water, river water, and a host of rivers are mentioned, including Kaveri, Sharavati, Kaveri, bone of contention, Sharavati, all these rivers are mentioned. And again in Puravarga, what kinds of houses should be there, how the roads should be, what are the different kinds of houses of rich people, houses of poor people, houses for ascetics, king's palace, all these things are mentioned. That means urban ecology was fairly evident because everything is in one name, so you can't expect much details because Amarasimha just collected popular words and then he included them. So this is how you have to sift and find out the information. And coming to biotic ecology, Varivarga mentions aquatic plants and aquatic animals, and then Simhadi Varga mentions various kinds of animals, both Gramya as well as Aranya, several types of birds, and all these things are mentioned in full detail. Now I would like to discuss something about the biodiversity, particularly plant diversity, especially from Vanaushadhi Varga. Vanaushadhi Varga deals with all kinds of plants, plant parts, descriptions, etc. In the plant kingdom, we have starting from algae, fungi, microscopic organisms, and then up to flowering plants. In Varivarga, there are 3 terms for algae. Jalanili, Tushaivala, Shaivalotha, Kumudvati. What is Jalanili? The one that imparts blue coloration to the water. Indeed, some of the algae, particularly Spirogyra and others, when they are producing reproductive structures called zygotes, they are blue in color, and because of the numerous number, the whole water turns blue. Mushrooms are also mentioned. Chatra, Tichatra, Palagno, Malas, Trinakabhustrune, this is also mentioned. And then the most important aspect is the difference between an epiphyte and a parasite is known only to a botanist. What is an epiphyte? An epiphyte is a plant that simply grows on other plants without taking nutrition from the host plant. Whereas a parasite takes nutrition from the host plant as well as shelter, ultimately killing the host. This is very clearly mentioned by Amarakosha and the commentary of Kshiraswami. Of course, when I mention the Kshiraswami's commentary on Amarakosha, I have to be very, very careful because the whole lot of it is done here. Anyway, let me try. The words are Vanda Vrikshadini Vriksharuha Jivantika. When I went to the commentary, it says Vrikshadini. What is Vrikshadini? Janma vrikshamapi hanti iti Vrikshadini. That which kills the tree of origin. It has to be a parasite. What is Vriksharoha? Vrikshe rohati Vriksharoha. That which simply grows on a tree without causing any damage. That must be an epiphyte. Now please tell me, my question is this. Amarakosha is not a botany book. Amarasimha was not a botanist. What did he do? He collected popular terms. If epiphyte and parasite, without being limited only to the high level of botanist, if it has to percolate down to the common man, so that Amarasimha found it necessary to include these terms, what must have been the botanical knowledge of the botanists themselves? I leave it for you to decide. And different types of forests are mentioned. How we can give information? Atam Yaranyam Vipinam Gahanam Kananam Vanam Maharanyam Aranyani Graha Ramastu Nishkutaha Aramasya Dipavanam Kritrimam Vanamevatate. Different types of forests are mentioned. And yesterday I think one chairperson, she spoke about Aranya. Vinarane iti Aranya. Normally on the face of it you must disagree. Because a lion kills a deer, there is always violence. There is a difference between this violence and a mindless violence. What is this violence? This is for the sake of food. It has to kill. Is it clear? It is not a sport. But what do we say, human beings? We call wild animals as sport, game. Look at the terms that we use. It's a game for us, but it is a life for them. I had seen one movie called African Safari, a very old movie. There you see a tiger or a lion, they hunt a deer. Once they are through, the to-be victim animals, they will know that the lion is satiated, tiger is satiated. They graze very near to the lion. Nothing will happen to them. Can you expect this from a human being? You get something more is there, you covet for your son, still something more is there, why not for grandson? This is the greed. This greed is not there. That is why the term Aranya is correct. Now, I have listed the plants and with the photographs also. 308 plants are mentioned. Way back when I first published a paper on Amarakosha as a source of Hindu botany in 1979. At that time, first time when I studied Amarakosha as a botanist, I thought these numerous names, is it not a confusion? For every tree, 5-6 names are given. And then it occurred to me, the ancient Indian Ayurvedic Vaidyas, they were not going with a huge book of description and identifying the plant, nor they were just examining the patient, writing a prescription. They used to prepare medicine themselves. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic doctors must have been more botanists than botanists themselves. You know why? If a botanist identifies a plant wrongly, heavens will not fall down. But if a doctor identifies a plant wrongly and prepares medicine, it is a question of life. So identification of plant is very important. These synonyms, they try to give a character for each of the plant. I will give you few examples. The sacred fig tree, Bodhidrumas Chaladalaha Pippala Kunjarashanaha. What is this? Bodhidruma, associated with Buddha. Chaladala, this is a very beautiful botanical character. Chaladala means leaves moving, moving. A leaf moving or oscillating because of breeze is not something great. It is seen in every plant. Why it is mentioned only here? Again, look to the commentary of Shiraswami. Says, Dhanapatratvat, Trinavrintatvat, Swalpaipi Vatamapi Chalati iti Chaladalaha. Because of a heavy lamina and a thin petiole, it is attached in a jointed form. So even for a mild breeze, it moves like this. You just observe the movement of leaves in all other trees and movement in this is because it's a wavy movement. Right? Dhanapatratvat, Tanuvrintatvat, Swalpaipi Vatamapi iti Chaladalaha. Bodhidruma Chadala Pippalaha. There are several meanings for this. One of the meaning I have taken is, the tree if worshipped will assure you that I will protect you. That is why it is called Pippala. Kunjarashana, it is food for elephant. Likewise, the country fig tree. Audumbara Jantupalaha Yajnango Hemadubdakaha. What is Audumbara? I checked the commentary once again. Ullangita Ambara iti Audumbara. See, here comes interpretation, not just a meaning. Nothing cloth can come out of a tree. It is bark peeling out of a tree. Ullangita Ambaraha Audumbaraha. Jantupala. You cut the fruit, you get worms inside the fruit or flies inside the Jantupala. Yajnanga, the twiglets were used for sacrificial rites. Hemadubdakaha, a truly botanical character. You break the twigs, you get a latex, not a complete white latex, somewhat golden colored latex. Hemadubdakaha. In other comment, it is also mentioned as Udumbara Kanchanakshiri, again gold colored latex. See, in ecology, some of the recent discoveries have shown that the Ficus glamerata is the wild fig, is a very important tree, and it is called the ecological source tree. Do you know why it is called the ecological source tree? When all the other trees of the forest have refused to put fruits, when it is in a drought situation, not even leaves are there, this produces fruits always. This character was observed at Shiraswami. He said, Udumbara Sadaphalai. Look at the beautiful word they put. Of course, interpretation is Udumbara Sadaphalai. And then I will give you one or two more plants. Aragvadho Rajavraksha Shamya Kash Chaturangulaha. What is Aragvadha? That which kills evils. Don't say devils. Evils like skin, it is used for skin treatment, is it clear? And many diseases it will cure. Rajavraksha, it is king among the trees. Shamyaka, it is like Shami. Shamivat Shamyaka. Chaturangulaha, 4-fingered long fruit. Likewise, there is one plant, Alstonia scolaris. This Alstonia scolaris is Saptaparani Vishalatvak Sharado Vishamachataha. It has got 7 leaflets. Vishalatvak, wide bark. Sharada, flowers during Sharadjutu. Vishamachada, dissection of leaflets is uneven. With this, let me go to the last book of analysis, Parashara's Vriksha Ayurveda, supposed to be hailed as the first botanical scientific book. I consider this as really very great when compared to other Vriksha Ayurveda. According to this, in 700 BC, there is a medicinal plant symposium chaired by sage Bharadwaja, and there several rishis asked Bharadwaja to tell them about the name of to research in Vriksha Ayurveda and tell them. Vane Chaitra Rathe Ramye Sametah Punya Karmanaha Bharadwaja Daya Sarve Echanye Munishuttamaha Jnatumichantaha Paprachu Parasharam Maharshayah Prishtena Munibhis Sarvaih Parasharo Bravit Tataha Atharvangam Pravakshami Brahmoktam Vriksha Vaidyakam. I need not give the meaning once again. You know, it very simply, at the request of all the rishis, Parashara said, I will let you know about the different types of plants. This consists of fantastic information on plant cell description is there, familial description is there, description of families, and a whole lot of botanical factors are there. I will just mention only one sloka and description of only one family. Athataha Vakshami Swastika Pushpam Sarvalakshanahi. Swastika crosswise arrangement of flowers. Swastika Pushpam Sarvalakshanahi. Swastikam Tundamandalam Vallaryam Pankibandhanam. Jalakam Swastikakaram Pushpantam Muktamevacha. Chaturdalancha Muktancha Shanmukta Kesaranvitam. Tesham Dve Kharva Kesaraha Bhavati Pushpamandale. Yugmam Varatakam Yuktam Phalancha Diputam Bhavet. Sadrisham Sami Phalena Sandhitam. Sadrisham Sami Phalena Sandhitam. This he says, flowers are tetradienous, 4 are short, 2 are long, and then calyx is free, and the fruit is attached to a central rhipium, and the seeds are exposed. It is like a silicoa. These are the descriptions. Friends, I don't want to take much time. The amount of true botany I have exposed to you must instill a tremendous confidence in you. Yes, we are the worthy inheritors of such great scientists. In fact, first time when I presented in Australia, somebody asked me, do you mean to say Parashara is the father of Indian botany? I said, no. Why? They said, Parashara is not father of Indian botany, he is the father of botany. Not Indian botany. Right? At a time when Theophrastus was classifying plants as herbs, shrubs and trees, here we were classifying plants based on the reproductive structures. A thing that was discovered in 17th century. So that will be a different story. Time does not permit, I would like to stop here. Except telling, is it that ancient Indian science or botany consists of everything? Yes and no. It does not consist of anything. Again the answer is yes and no. It does consist of something, and it is still, unfortunately, because we have not made attempts to understand it, it is like a freshly harvested crop. In a freshly harvested crop, there are chaff of ignorance, there are grains of knowledge. What we need to do is scientifically and systematically winnow this and separate the grains of knowledge from the chaff of ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful speech. It is always fascinating to listen to Dr. Sundar Rajan, the velocity with which he is able to go from the audio text, be it Anushriti Varga or Maheshwar Varga of Amarabhasha or Shiksha Veda of Paradara or ASA. We are very grateful to you, sir, for coming over here with